be here with you guys, and you guys are athletes, right? And like, I can tell, like, just from seeing you guys are athletes. It's actually kind of humbling for me, because I consider myself just an accountant that got really blessed to work with athletes, to work in sports, because God knows I'm not an athlete, and I've never had what it took to be an athlete. So I try to figure out how to get involved in sports in ways outside of, actually playing the sports. So what I wanted to do today is really just kind of share my story from like my beginning, where, I kind of grew up, how I got to where I am, and just kind of the struggles and the challenges that, come with being in sports, but also just kind of living life as a Christian, right? Just a bit about me. I was born into a Christian family. My dad is actually a pastor for a church for 40 years. He just retired a few years ago. And it was, a small church. And ever since I was a kid, I was always at church. That was just kind of, my environment, right? I played the violin growing up too. And so every Wednesday, every Friday, they would have service, and my dad would force me to go play violin at the church, right in front of the congregation. It was a small church. It was like maybe 50 to 100 people. And so, up until high school, especially, growing up, you want to hang out with your friends, you want to do, the stuff that all your friends do. I was forced to play violin at my dad's church, and I hated it so much. But what it did, it actually taught me the value of one, family, but two, church, and how important that was for me. Like I said, growing up, my dad being a pastor, we really didn't have much. Growing up I don't know if you guys know Tuxedo Court, but Tuxedo Court is a very tough neighborhood, and we literally had nothing, right? Like, we were kind of scrounging for dollars. And I remember growing up, probably the most traumatic moment of my life was when I was 8 years old. So I was like grade 3, and my parents literally told me, like, we don't have any money. We don't know what we're gonna do, but we're gonna just trust in God and have faith in God that He's gonna pull us through. And I was 8 at the time, and I was bawling, and I was like, how are we gonna survive? Like, how are we gonna, I don't even want Christmas presents. I don't even want, like, how are we gonna have food on the table? And I remember sitting at, if you guys know the area, it's like Markham and Ellesmere, like a Scotiabank there. I was sitting in my parents' car, and they told me that, because we were at Scotiabank, and they were like literally looking at the bank statement. They're like, we have the money. Like, we're just gonna have faith that God's gonna pull us through. And it really taught me, one, the amount of faith that my parents had in Christ and in God, through just the most difficult of situations. It was me and my brother, just the most difficult of situations, how much they relied on God. And through that, it taught me, one, that it wasn't about money. It wasn't about how much material possessions you had. But the crazy thing was, my parents were probably the happiest people you would ever meet. And what that taught me was, this world is gonna have its ups and downs, and there's gonna be challenges for sure. But if you have Christ in your life, just the joy that comes with that was something that really stuck with me. And so there were two things that came out of that. One, I learned that, and two, I learned I never want to be a pastor, because that's something that was just way too hard for me. And so that actually kind of propelled me to think. And I told my dad that I don't think I could follow in your footsteps. Like, I need to do something else with my life, because I don't know if I have the faith to do that. And so, kind of coming out of that, I actually went to U of T. So I was in the commerce program here. Ended up being the commerce. I don't know if anyone, like, is anyone here from U of T? Like, how many of you guys are from U of T? Yeah. So I was at Rotman Commerce. I was actually the president of the Commerce Students Association my last year, which was really cool. Such a great experience. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew again, I wanted to get into business because I thought getting into business is how you make money, and but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And going into U of T, the kind of accounting presence at U of T was really strong, right? Like there's like the big four accounting firms, and they would come every weekend and try to wine and dine you, say, come work for us at PwC or Ernst & Young. And so that, even though I didn't know what I wanted to get into, I was wined and dined by these big four accounting firms. And eventually I kind of said, okay, I'm gonna try this. So ended up going to picking a firm, which was PricewaterhouseCoopers. Worked there for 3 years while I got my kind of designation. So I got my accounting degree and my chartered accounting designation, which now I think is called the CPA, but at the time it was called the CA. And then I literally, and so to get those letters, you have to work a certain number of hours. You got to work a certain number of different kind of proficiencies to get your letters. I hated it so much. I was like, I need to get out of here. So I calculated to the hour what I needed to get those letters and got out. And so I got out as soon as I could, which was like 3.5 years. Then I went to a company called Unilever. Unilever is like a CPG company. They own like Ben & Jerry's, Dove, Axe body spray. Like they just own like a whole bunch of different like consumer good products. And worked there for about 1.5 years. And then, one of the first kind of mistakes I made in my career was I was chasing money and I was chasing titles, right? And so at the time I was like a senior financial analyst, and it was a really cool job. Got to work with the team selling products to like Loblaws, for example. And one of the cool things about my job was I would help negotiate different coupons and different promotions. So when you go to Loblaws and you see like, I don't know, Dove products or like a Ben & Jerry's on sale, like 2 for $5 or 2 for $10 or whatever it was, I was the one that was helping come up with those kind of promotions. And it was really fun, a lot of really cool experiences, but I was searching for that next role, right? And so with that, I was like, I need to become a manager, right? Like I'm, in my early 20s, but if I became manager, and I think I would make it. That would be it for me. So I ended up applying for a job at Canadian Tire. There was a manager of accounting job, and even though I loved working at Unilever, I decided to take this job because it was a manager position. It was more money, and I wanted to move up quickly in my career. And I hated it. It was literally like I dreaded going into work every single day. I was working with not to sound mean, but I was like, I don't know, 26, 27 at the time, and I was working with like 50-year-olds. And they just wanted to come into the office, clock in, clock out. No one wanted to talk. They were just, heads down. Whereas at Unilever, everyone was like young, and we had a lot of fun. Like we would go out every Friday night. And so I took that role because of money and because of a title, and I hated it. So my first kind of lesson growing up, in the real kind of work world was I made a mistake chasing a title or chasing money, when I think finding a role or finding an industry or a company that you really enjoy going into was probably better for me at the time. So I hated my time at Canadian Tire. I left Unilever. I hated being an accountant. I was like, what do I do with my life? Like what's kind of that next step? And so I knew I was passionate about 2 things in life, which was sports and music. So I played a lot of music growing up. I played, the guitar, the violin, piano, but I didn't know what kind of industry to get into, right? Like I didn't want to, I just didn't know what industry there was for music, but I knew in sports, there was Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, right? And obviously, with the Leafs, the Raptors, TFC, the Argos, I was like, I need to get into this organization, right? Like, if I'm gonna be an accountant, and if this is what God wanted me to do with my life, and He's kind of led me to be an accountant, I gotta figure out a way to get into an industry that I would be passionate about. So I ended up reaching out, and I said, do you have any roles for me? And they had a role, but it was less money, less title than what I currently had at Canadian Tire. But I said, if this was something I'm gonna do for the rest of my life, I'm gonna do that. So I actually took a lower paying job to get my foot in the door at MLSE. And from there, I just kind of said, I think this is where God wants me to be, and I'm gonna work my tail off to get there. And so I ended up working there for 11 years, eventually kind of making my way up to like a VP of finance role. And then 3 years ago, the Florida Panthers called me and they're like, hey, we're looking for a CFO. Would you be interested in moving down to Florida? At the time, Florida was actually a really bad team. Like they were like second from the bottom at the time. In Toronto, like the Leafs were actually, I think they were 1 or 2 in the East. So I was like, man, do I really want to go to Florida? To go from like a team that's number 1 or 2 down to a team that's at the bottom. But it was a CFO role. And that was my dream. Like my dream was actually to be the CFO of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And I knew if I wanted to get there, I needed to get a CFO role somewhere else. So I was like, yes, Florida. 1, I'll get away from the winter weather here. 2, my dad had just retired. And so for him to have a place to come down to in Florida would be amazing. And 3, it was just like a CFO role. So I jumped at the chance. And when I started there in January of 2023, like I said, they were second from the bottom. I remember looking at the odds online, and they had like a 9% chance to make the playoffs. And so joined there, and then we went on this magical run. Like, I don't know if you guys follow hockey, but we went on a magical run, made it to the playoffs on the last day of the regular season, and then ended up going all the way to the finals that year. We ended up losing to the Las Vegas Golden Knights that one year, but it just kind of, it was just incredible to see just the growth of hockey there. When I first moved there in January, I was at a park with my kids. I have 3 young kids, and I was wearing like a Florida Panthers sweater, and someone came up to me, they're like, oh, that's cool sweater. That's like the minor league baseball team here, right? And I was like, no, we're a professional hockey team, and we're in Florida. Like no one had any idea what the Panthers were. And so that was kind of eye-opening, because like here, if I wear a Leafs jersey, like everyone knows the Leafs. But in Florida, no one knew what the Panthers were. And so to kind of see that momentum grow was really cool. And so we made it to the finals that first year, really cool run. And then, as you might know, the next 2 years, we ended up going back to the finals and winning back-to-back Stanley Cups, which is incredible, right? So, one of the highlights of my time there was, so as the CFO, I get to bring the Stanley Cup. Like I get a day with the cup. So last year, when we won the first time, I actually brought it back to Toronto. And I took it to the local hockey rink where I used to live, and then went to like St. Louis, and then had people come by, and it was a really cool experience. And then last year, the day I just kept it in Florida. But it was really cool because for me as an accountant, like I said, like I don't really have I'm not an athlete. I'm not the one performing on the ice or whatnot. But I really feel like even in the business side of things, I get really I get to kind of put my input into a lot of things that might find its way onto the court or on the ice. So one of the cool things that I love to share was I feel partially responsible for bringing Kawhi to Toronto. Yeah. So in 2019, when I was in at MLSE, and when I say that facetiously, like I wasn't the one making the trade, but 2019 when that trade was about to go down, it was like 1 a.m. And I get a call. I wasn't the CFO of MLSE, but I was like a director of finance or something, and I ran like the insurance program, and I ran the cash, the treasury function at MLSE. And so I jump on a call. I get a call at like 1 a.m. I'm in bed, and it's my CFO, and she's like, I Messiah on the phone. I've got the board of directors on the phone, and I'm literally like, like half asleep. And she's like, I need you to do something for me. And so there were two concerns. One, Kawhi has a history of injuries and all of that. And so me, running the insurance portfolio, I had to kind of sign off on, bringing him to Toronto with those concerns. And would we be able to insure him with his injuries? And then two, that was the first time the Raptors would ever go into the luxury tax, right? And so if you know anything about the NBA and the luxury tax, like there's like this escalating impact of going into the luxury tax. And so what would going into the luxury tax look like, and what would a playoff scenario look like to offset what those extra costs would be? And so I was just quickly on my Excel spreadsheet, and actually Pat, I don't know where Emma is, but me and Pat were feverishly working on different models back in the next day to like figure out what that luxury tax impact would be. And so on that call at like 1:30 a.m., I was like, we can do this, right? And so they took that and they're like, let's do it. And then the next morning, it like hit the fan. Like Kawhi was a Raptor. I'm not saying if I said no, we can't do it. I think they would still go with the trade. But it was really cool for me to be involved in a conversation where my input was a little bit of a determining factor on whether we go through with the trade. And truth be told, at the time I was like, what are we doing? Like, DeMar DeRozan is like a Raptor for life. He's the only guy that said Toronto's my home. Like, he's the one that put Toronto on the map. Like, how are we gonna trade him? And so that's why I'm not a GM, obviously. But at the time I was like, man, I think we're making a big mistake. But it was really, anyways, it was really cool to see. And then, with the Panthers, we made some really crazy trades over the last couple of years. And so anytime there's a trade, I'm the one that's having to sign off on the contracts and certain things like that. So like I said, I don't make the moves, but I'm involved, and I give my input, and I kind of give my quote unquote blessing to some of these big deals that are about to happen. So yeah, it's just been really cool. And like I said, for me, who I knew, growing up, I'm not going to be an athlete that's going to make millions and millions of dollars, but I love sports. Hockey, funny enough, was the one sport that my parents would not let me play. So I played a lot of basketball and baseball growing up. But knowing that sports was, just something that was just ingrained in my kind of fiber, I needed to figure out a way how to get into sports. And so, taking a lower position to get into MLSE, working my way up, and then eventually, going to the Panthers, it's just been a huge blessing. And I'm actually, so right now I've actually left the Panthers. I'm back in Toronto for a couple months. I've got a couple of things in the fire that are really interesting that might bring me back to either the NBA or whatnot. So it's really exciting for me, and hopefully get back out of Toronto and go back into warmer climates. But yeah, that's just kind of where I came from, and why I am kind of who I am. And I will say, at the end of the day, I do really have an understanding that God's blessed me in everything that I've done, and kind of advice that I would give is, be humble in all that you do, right? It's easy, especially as an athlete. I can see, because I can see these athletes, growing up. You guys are like the stars of the show, right? You guys are, kind of looked upon as these like, just the coolest kids, right? Like, I was never that, growing up in high school, but you have that attention, you have that spotlight, and you have all this pressure on you guys. And then when you guys succeed, or when you guys, sometimes don't succeed, it's easy to get down on yourself. But in all things, I think my biggest, advice would really to just be, to be humble in anything that you do. That's kind of what I feel like has got me to where I am. I never, thought of myself as like this incredible CFO or incredible, accountant or anything like that. And anytime I've had to do interviews or meet with people, I always tell people it's not about me. It's, I profess my faith as, Christ is, like my faith is bigger than anything. and it really kind of allows me to stay grounded and stay humble in everything that I do. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And my second thing would be is just be a servant leader, right? Especially as you kind of go up the career ranks. Don't think of yourself, as you become a director or a VP or a chief in whatever capacity. Being a leader is one thing, but being a servant leader, I think, is what God calls us to be, right? And what I mean by being a servant leader is, putting yourself out there, not being too big for the moment, not being too big for your team or for anyone else. And so, as a CFO, I try to make sure that everyone, down to like the coordinator level, is getting the time and attention, and I'm helping out in any way possible. And I really feel that that's the way to kind of lead, right? Not leading by telling, but leading by doing. So being a servant leader and being humble, are kind of my two biggest kind of takeaways that I would love to kind of impart on you guys. So yeah, that's kind of me.
Thanks so much, James. Got a couple questions, and then we're gonna actually just do a little bit of live Q&A. If you have any questions, this is a good time to pick someone's brain that's in some respects sitting or has sat at the top of an organization, right? So my two questions is the first one being because now we have, maybe more than ever, we've seen very like an entitled culture, right? How would you advise or counsel students at this stage to what does it mean to actually put in work and slow down?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do find they're entitled. I do feel like the generation now, you guys are just so much more informed and just way smarter than I think we were growing up, right? It's just, there's so much information out there, and the way you guys process that information, one, you guys are way more knowledgeable than probably we were at the same age growing up, but then it gives you that feeling of, I know it all, right? And so what I can say, it kind of goes back to being humble and being a servant leader is, you may know it all, or you may feel like you do know it all, but leaders or people at the tops of organizations, they see right through that, right? Even if you do know it all, the way it comes across, it could be a very big detriment to you, right? And so my advice really would be, to just be humble about it, right? Even if you feel like you know it because you've read about it or you've studied it or you saw it on Instagram or whatever it is, having that attitude of humbleness or meekness, what it says in the Bible, I think will go a long way because, when you profess to know everything, it's just when you fail or when you fall, you just fall that much harder, right? And so, yeah, just kind of taking a bit of a humble approach to everything, even if you feel like you know everything. Yeah.
And then the second question is, you've seen a lot of money move.
Yeah.
Lots of money. What would you say, what is the disposition of people that have attained this kind of money? What is, where is their mind at? Where's their heart at? How do we see Christ, be king overall?
Yeah.
When you see, people with unlimited zeros.
Yeah. It's tough. I'm not an athlete, so I don't have the kind of money that these athletes do. But you can see it. And it's funny because a lot of athletes, when they win the Super Bowl or Stanley Cup, they'll say, thanks God, all thanks God, glory to God. And they kind of profess it. But I get to see what actually happens, right? How their life is outside of it. And the one guy that kind of sticks in my mind is our goalie, Sergei Bobrovsky. He's one of the greatest goalies ever to play the game. Guaranteed Hall of Famer. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars, and he lives a Christian life. I can tell, right? When we won and everyone was partying, or we're on parades, He's there with his wife and his kids, and he's just like not drinking, not partying, he's not taking it, like he's just the most down to earth guy. Versus I've seen guys who, profess to be Christians and money talks, right? Like, and being a celebrity and being, all that, it's tough. So I can't even imagine what it would be like to have that kind of money, have that kind of clout, have that kind of fame and celebrity, and not fall into those temptations. But I've also seen it happen, and I've seen it happen really well, right? Like Bobrovsky's a great example. I think in the NBA, there's a couple of players that I've seen do that same thing, and so it is possible, but it's tough, right?
Difficult. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to open it up. If there's anyone that has a question, now would be a good time. Yes.
I just wanted to ask, because you were talking about how hungry you were for more earlier in your career.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us right now, I feel like we're all thinking about summer internships, and you see someone post on LinkedIn that they work at Big Ten. But I just how did you quiet your mind? How did you actually find ways to listen to God early in your career when you were worried about your future?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If I'm being honest, I didn't ask God. I think my mind and mentality was I need to move up as fast as I can. And I didn't mention this, but going to Canadian Tire, where I took that jump because I needed the role and whatnot, I ended up being part of a restructure. So I actually got fired a year and a half into it because they got rid of a bunch of people. And that was really humbling for me, right? Thinking, I'm taking on these new roles. And that was probably the first time I asked God for help in my career. I actually remember going to church because I got let go. So I was out of a job for a couple months, and I had just bought a house. So I had a mortgage now. I didn't have a job. I remember going to church because, like I said, my dad was a pastor, so I had the keys to the church. So I remember going to church at 1:30 or 2 o'clock in the morning and just going into the sanctuary and getting on my knees and praying and saying, God, I need help. I can't do this by myself. So that was the first real, honestly, the first time I actually prayed to God to help me with my career, right? It wasn't just about life. It was very specific on helping me with my career. And whether it was God speaking to me or opening up doors, I think, being it was humbling to say that I'm gonna take a lesser role now to go into an industry that I wanted to get into. But I think, just kind of looking back, it was really God opening doors that way, but really just coming before him and asking him. But like I said, growing up, until I got to that point, I wasn't thinking about God. I was really just relying on my own skills and my own, expertise to get me as far as I wanted to go, and it didn't work out, right?
Great question. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
You mentioned that you had to, help make some really important decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, how did you deal with the stress, anxiety? If it was me, I'd tweak.
Yeah.
How did you deal with the stress and anxiety of oh, if I get this guy, we can't really actually insure him, and then he gets injured first game.
Yeah.
So what do you need to do?
Yeah. Well, probably not those instances, but there's been a handful of instances in my career where, your palms just start sweating, right? Your whole body just starts shaking because you're either I screwed up or there's something bad's gonna happen, and really, all I can say is it's in those moments that you pray and you ask God for that peace. And I'll just quickly share with so like I said, I'm in Toronto right now. Some crazy stuff happened between me and the Panthers and another team, which is kind of the reason why I'm here right now waiting for some stuff to settle. And in that moment, it was, I just couldn't believe it, right? Like, there were lawsuits being thrown, there was money being, like, it was just crazy, and all the while, I'm like this, what I feel like I'm just caught in the middle between these two teams they're fighting. And I'm having to leave Florida, I'm being kind of blacklisted from the Panthers with all these other, I can't get into it, but it's just crazy. And so at the same time, I don't know what's gonna happen with me, my family. Like I said, I have a wife and 3 kids, and I'm shaking, right? But what I realized was, in those moments is really where God shows up for me, right? And it could have been really easy for me to get angry at God or get angry at the world for the situations and circumstances that I'm in. But it was just crazy how good God was in those moments, and it provided that kind of peace for me. So what I will say is, in any career, in any situation, you guys are, no one's gonna have the perfect life. No one's gonna have the perfect career or the perfect job where everything goes exactly the way that it's gonna go. Like at MLSC one time, I made a mistake that was $100 million mistake. Now, when I say I made $100 million
Drop your
mistake,
drink kind of mistake, goodness.
it was a big mistake. Like, and not all of it was our fault. Like, or finance's fault. Like, there were big things that were happening, like big trades and whatever. But I was telling our owners we're gonna make this much money, and we ended up making only this much money, and it was crazy. And so I was like, I'm gonna get fired. And so, at the time I was like, the only thing I can do is be upfront with it. I'm not gonna hide it. I'm not gonna try to blame anyone else, even though, it wasn't all my fault. Like, there were trades that were happening, there were upfront, signing bonus payments that we had no idea about, but I'm just gonna be upfront with it. I'm gonna go out and just admit to, these errors. And that was the best thing to happen for me. And so whenever mistakes are happening, and like I said, you guys are gonna make mistakes. No one's perfect. Any job, you're gonna have stresses in life. You just gotta be upfront with it. Bad news out fast is kind of my motto, right? Good news travels fast. Bad news should travel faster. So that, is kind of, something I've kind of lived by. And so, I don't know, just trusting God, but know that, God gives you peace in those moments, and he'll help you through it.
Maybe one more question, if anyone has one.
How do you stay humble while kind of like being at the top?
For me, it's been honestly just ingrained in me from when I was a kid, right? Like I said, I didn't have anything growing up, and so I know that my life really isn't my own, right? And I think God's really, I really feel like God's using me to be just kind of his instrument, right? And so with that, I really don't take any of this as my own doing, and that's really helped me be grounded in knowing that it's not about me. There are moments where like if I'm walking into Toronto with the Stanley Cup over my head, like it's kind of hard not to puff up your chest a little bit, but I for me, it's knowing that it's all because God's blessed me with opportunities. It's kind of been easier for me to stay humble through it all.
In short, remember where you came from.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
Room for one more?
Room for one more, always.
I feel like in a lot of corporate jobs, like it's often things to find like workaholics and stuff. So how did you kind of manage like high performance, like time put into work while also building your relationship with God as well?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. When I was at MLSE, I worked 6 days a week, like 12-hour days. Like it was wild. It was.
It's a lonely road to the top.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Like I didn't have much of a social life. But the two things that I held near and dear to my heart were work and was church, right? Like I went to church and I was the worship leader at my church since I was 16 years old. Like I learned how to play guitar because our church didn't have a praise team, and so my dad was like, "You need to learn how to play guitar." So I learned how to play guitar at 16, and
Some of y'all can relate. Some of y'all can relate, I'm sure.
So I was the worship leader from 16 till I was 40. So like almost 25 years. And so those were my two biggest priorities in life, right? And so didn't really think about having relationships or going out too much or anything like that. But I knew one, I wanted to. My goal in life was to be a CFO at a sports company, particularly MLSE, if that would happen. And so that was my goal, and I knew church was a huge priority for me, not just because my faith, but also because my dad was a pastor, and I needed to support the family, and I needed to support him. So even though I was working so much, that was always something that I would not sacrifice, right? So if I had to sacrifice anything, it was hanging out with friends or hanging out with, I didn't have a girlfriend until I was like 26 or 27 or whatever, like after university, just because of, how, just the priorities in my life. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's give James a round of applause.
I brought, if you guys want to take a picture, I brought my Stanley Cup champion ring with me. So I have a Raptors one. I didn't bring that one.
Big mistake, right?
I have two Stanley Cup rings for the 2 years. I brought the most recent one. So if you guys want to take a picture with it after,
Yeah, we'll do that after. Let's if you would be willing, would you pray over the students?
Yeah.
Yes.
Our Father, I just want to thank you for today. I thank you for this time. And even though this time was short, I pray that just whatever was said, it meant something for someone today. I can't imagine the pressures and the feelings and the stresses of what each person here may or may not be going through. I pray that you give them wisdom, you open doors, and that in all things that they would look to you for direction, and that they would be humble in the things that they do, that they would give you the glory and give you the honor in all of life's successes, but also in their failures, also in the low points, that they would turn to you and praise you and give you thanks in all circumstances. So I pray for each one of us here today, that you would impart in us just wisdom, impart in us humbleness and gratitude, and ask that you would just guide us throughout life as these young athletes just kind of, take the next step and wherever you want them to go, give them clear direction in life. We thank you for this time again. In your name we pray. Amen.
All right. Before we break off into a short time of discussion in prayer groups, if you want to stay around for that, you're more than welcome to. Is the Bible says this, is that what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but forfeit his soul? Right? And I think I love what James was saying, because in some ways we're all striving. We all want to make it, and we all want to make a lot of money along the way, right? But if we made all that and we got to the top, but we had no love in our heart, right? We had no humility, and ultimately if we didn't have an eternal destination, because the reality is, if you come to Connect Groups, we're in Ecclesiastes, but it says that you could live this whole life, work all you want, make all the money you want, but if you were to drop dead the next day, someone's gonna get all your money, and you wouldn't have got to use it at all, right? So it would be all in vain if there was nothing eternal about the life that you're living and what you're pursuing. So before we break off into discussion groups, how do you want to do it, Dave?
I think each leader can take like 7, 8 people.
Okay, so if you're staying around for discussion groups, remain, and then maybe if I get the leaders to stand, 1, 2, 3, 4, stand up. You can just find your way to a leader and answer this one question and pray together is, what am I chasing? What am I chasing or pursuing that is stealing my joy? What am I pursuing or chasing that is stealing my joy? All right? So, yeah, just find yourself to a place and a corner. Yeah, hopefully it's also encouraging for you.
Hopefully, hopefully.
No, I know. It's not number of students, just like, oh man, thank you for what you're saying. And I think for them, like they do give them the needle, but like at what, they don't know why. So I think to hear from someone like that, like humility can also carry, Nate Mitten. I was telling him about Nate. So Nate is a strength and conditioning.
Oh, you don't need, yeah, you don't need too.
I'm not sure if they would actually like.
It might have just been like just out of.
You guys wait for me?
Yeah, that's speech by the way though.
My name's Joey. Joey?
Alright, see you Thursday. Yeah. See you Thursday? Alright. Take it easy.